The sink was dripping again, that slow, methodical torture that Julia pretended not to hear but complained about constantly. I was elbow-deep in rusty pipes when her voice drifted down from the kitchen above, crystal clear through the heating vents. "He's fine for now. My interim solution until I find something better." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Her laughter was like breaking glass. I froze, wrench in hand, listening to my wife of 15 years dismiss me like yesterday's leftovers. Nice to know I rated somewhere between a placeholder and a participation trophy in my own marriage. Maybe I should wear a "for lease" sign around the house. Trust me, Rebecca, I'm working on it. Eric's been very helpful with my options. Eric, her brother-in-law's business partner, the guy who showed up at family barbecues in his Tesla, flashing that real estate agent smile like he was closing deals on everyone's souls. The same Eric who'd been texting Julia at all hours, supposedly about investment opportunities. I climbed the basement stairs quietly, years of living with Julia having taught me the art of invisible movement. She was pacing the kitchen in her power suit, phone pressed to her ear, completely oblivious to my presence. The girls will be fine. Kids adapt. And honestly, Tom's been so ordinary lately. I need someone who matches my ambition. Ordinary. 15 years of marriage, 2 daughters, and I'd been downgraded to ordinary. I fixed her computer when it crashed, managed our finances, coached Hannah's soccer team, and helped Erin with her algebra homework. But apparently, being a reliable IT consultant didn't qualify as ambitious enough for Julia's new standards. I know. The timing has to be perfect. I can't afford any mistakes with the partnership vote coming up. The partnership vote. Julia had been gunning for senior partner at her law firm for 3 years. Apparently, her strategy involved trading up husbands like she was upgrading her BMW. I backed into the hallway as she turned toward the window. Through the kitchen doorway, I watched her examine her reflection in the glass, smoothing her blonde hair with the kind of satisfaction that comes from having a secret plan. Eric thinks we should wait until after the holidays. Give me time to document everything properly. You know how these things go in divorce court. Document everything. My wife was building a case against me while I fixed her sink. The front door slammed, making us both jump. Erin stomped in, backpack slung over her shoulder, 13 years old and already carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction. "Dad, Mom's car isn't in the driveway again." Julia ended her call quickly. "I'm right here, sweetheart." "You're always on the phone." Erin's voice carried that particular teenage blend of accusation and resignation. "Hannah's at Emma's house. She asked if you were coming to her art show tomorrow." I watched Julia's face cycle through emotions. Guilt, irritation, calculation. "Of course I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it." Erin looked at me with the kind of skepticism that breaks a father's heart. She'd stopped believing her mother's promises months ago, though she hadn't stopped hoping. "I'll pick up Hannah," I said. "We can grab dinner on the way home." "Thanks, Dad." Erin headed upstairs, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood. Julia waited until our daughter's door closed before turning to me with that practiced smile she used on difficult clients. "How's the sink coming along?" "Fixed." I held up the wrench. "Just like everything else around here that breaks." She missed the edge in my voice completely. "Great. I have a client dinner tonight, so I'll be late. Don't wait up." Client dinner. Right. I nodded, playing the role of the understanding husband while my mind raced through possibilities. Eric's Tesla in the restaurant parking lot. Julia's new perfume that she claimed was for confidence in meetings. The credit card charges at hotels I'd never seen. "Which client?" I asked casually. "The Morrison account. Very demanding." She grabbed her purse, already moving toward the garage. "We might be at this for hours." The Morrison account had closed 2 weeks ago. I knew because I'd helped Julia prepare the final presentation, but I just smiled and waved as she drove away in her BMW, probably texting Eric before she reached the end of our street. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Family photos on the refrigerator, Hannah's artwork covering the breakfast nook, Aaron's honor roll certificates on the bulletin board. 15 years of memories that apparently meant less to Julia than whatever Eric was offering. My phone buzzed. Text from Tara, my girlfriend of 3 months. Well, girlfriend was generous. We'd met at a work conference, started texting, and somehow fallen into a casual thing that she'd made clear was strictly temporary. Movie tonight? Maya's making popcorn. Maya was Tara's roommate, the one who always seemed slightly embarrassed by Tara's behavior. Beautiful, smart, and way too good for the drama that surrounded her living situation. She'd been nothing but kind to me, which made her friendship with Tara one of life's great mysteries. I texted back, "On my way." Tara's apartment was a study in millennial aesthetics, exposed brick, string lights, and furniture that looked expensive, but fell apart if you sat on it wrong. I arrived to find her and 3 friends clustered around her laptop, swiping through dating apps like they were shopping for shoes. "Oh good, you're here." Tara barely looked up from the screen. "We're rating my Bumble matches. This guy's definitely an 8, but his job is questionable." Her friend Jessica glanced at me with barely concealed amusement. "What would you rate Tom, Tara?" Tara studied me with the clinical detachment of a used car appraiser. 5 out of 10? Maybe 6 on a good day. He's my interim solution until I find someone with better prospects. There it was again. Interim solution. Apparently, I'd been demoted to placeholder status in both my marriage and my affair. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "That's harsh," said Maya, appearing from the kitchen with a bowl of popcorn. She shot me an apologetic look that somehow made the whole situation worse. "Tom's sweet." "Sweet doesn't pay for vacations in Europe," Tara replied, still scrolling through profiles. "I need someone with ambition. Drive. Tom's nice, but he's not exactly going anywhere exciting." I sat on their uncomfortable couch, watching these women dissect my worth like I was furniture they were considering for donation. Maya settled beside me, close enough that I caught her perfume. Something subtle and expensive that made Tara's body spray smell like a high school locker room. "You deserve better than this," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over Tara's commentary on some investment banker's abs. I looked at her, really looked, for the first time. Dark hair, intelligent eyes, and the kind of genuine warmth that couldn't be faked. She was right. I did deserve better. We both did. "How about we skip the movie?" I suggested, standing up. "I should get home to the girls." Tara waved dismissively, already absorbed in her digital shopping spree. "Sure, whatever. Text me tomorrow." Maya walked me to the door, her hand briefly touching my arm. "I'm sorry about that. She gets carried away sometimes." "Sometimes?" She smiled sadly. "Okay, most of the time. But you really are worth more than she gives you credit for." I drove home through suburban streets lined with houses just like mine, 2-story colonials with perfect lawns and imperfect families. Every driveway told a story: the Hendersons with their matching BMWs and their son in rehab, the Johnsons with their pristine garden and their bitter custody battle, the Millers with their boat they couldn't afford and their second mortgage they couldn't escape. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street like a monument to middle-class mediocrity. Julia's BMW was still gone, of course. Inside, I found Aaron doing homework at the kitchen table while Hannah built elaborate structures with her Legos on the living room floor. "Dad?" Hannah looked up with 8-year-old seriousness. "Is Mom coming to my art show tomorrow?" I knelt beside her castle, an impressive construction of towers and bridges that defied several laws of physics. She said she would. She said she'd come to my soccer game last week, too. The quiet resignation in my younger daughter's voice hit harder than Tara's casual dismissal or Julia's phone conversation. These girls deserved better than parents who treated them like inconveniences. "Tell you what," I said, settling cross-legged on the carpet. "How about we make sure this art show is so amazing that everyone who misses it will be sorry?" Hannah's face lit up. "Really? You'll help?" "Absolutely. What's your piece about?" "Families. Mrs. Rodriguez said we should draw what family means to us." She showed me her sketch, stick figures holding hands around a house, with a dog that looked suspiciously like the golden retriever she'd been campaigning for since kindergarten. The mom figure was noticeably smaller than the others, almost an afterthought in the corner of the page. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Your mom's going to love it." If she bothered to show up. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat in my home office staring at bank statements and credit card bills. Julia had been busy. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, hotel charges during days when she'd claimed to be in depositions, shopping sprees that coincided with her client meetings. My wife wasn't just planning to leave me. She was financing her exit strategy with our joint accounts while building a case for why she deserved everything in the divorce. The documentation she'd mentioned to Rebecca wasn't about my shortcomings. It was about hiding her assets and maximizing her settlement. I opened a new browser window and started researching divorce lawyers. If Julia wanted to play games, she was about to learn that her ordinary husband had picked up a few tricks during his years in IT. Data recovery, digital forensics, and electronic surveillance weren't just useful for troubleshooting network problems. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Great meeting you tonight, Maya." I stared at the message, remembering the warmth in her eyes and the genuine concern in her voice. Here was someone who saw value in me when the two most important women in my life had written me off as a temporary convenience. I typed back, "Thanks for the popcorn and the honesty." Her response came quickly. "Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Without the peanut gallery?" I looked around my empty house, Julia still at her client dinner, the girls asleep upstairs, 15 years of marriage reduced to a placeholder arrangement. Maybe it was time to stop being everyone's interim solution and start being my own priority. "I'd like that," I typed. For the first time in months, I felt like I was making a choice instead of just reacting to everyone else's plans. Julia wanted to document everything? Perfect. I'd give her plenty to document. But first, I had an art show to attend and a daughter to support. Some things were more important than revenge. The kitchen sink had stopped dripping. Hannah's art show was held in the school's multi-purpose room, which smelled like industrial disinfectant and childhood dreams. Colorful paintings lined the walls while proud parents clustered around their young artists, smartphones ready to capture every moment of creative genius. I arrived early, parking next to the Hendersons' BMW and scanning the lot for Julia's car. No sign of her yet, but I'd learned not to expect punctuality when it came to family events. Her partnership vote was still 6 weeks away, but she'd been treating every evening like a campaign stop. "Dad, come see!" Hannah grabbed my hand the moment I walked through the door, dragging me toward a display labeled "What Family Means to Me." Her painting was more elaborate than the sketch I'd seen. The stick figures had evolved into recognizable people, and she'd added a golden retriever that looked suspiciously professional for an 8-year-old's work. "Did you get some help with this?" I asked, admiring the dog's realistic proportions. "Aaron showed me how to draw the ears right. And Maya helped with the shading." "Maya?" I stopped examining the painting. "When did you meet Maya?" "Yesterday, when you picked me up from Emma's house. She was there visiting Emma's sister. She's really nice, and she knows a lot about art." Small world. Or maybe not so small in a town where everyone's lives intersected in unexpected ways. I made a mental note to ask Maya about this when we met for coffee later. "Mr. Patterson." Mrs. Rodriguez, Hannah's art teacher approached with the enthusiasm that only elementary school teachers could maintain after decades of finger paints and glue sticks. Hannah's piece is absolutely wonderful. She has real talent. She gets it from her mother, I said automatically, then wondered why I was still giving Julia credit for things she'd never been part of. Will Mrs. Patterson be joining us tonight? I checked my phone. The show had been running for 30 minutes, and Julia's last text had been a vague, running late client emergency message that could mean anything from actual work to another dinner with Eric. She's hoping to make it, I said, which was technically true if you defined hoping loosely enough. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded with the practiced understanding of someone who'd seen too many disappointed children waiting for absent parents. Well, Hannah should be very proud. Her family portrait really captures something special. I looked at the painting again, noting details I'd missed before. The father figure was larger than the others, positioned protectively near the children. The mother figure was there but separate, almost like she was walking away from the group. And the house in the background had windows that looked like eyes, watching, waiting. It's very perceptive, I murmured. Children see more than we think they do, Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly. Hannah's been asking a lot of questions about different types of families lately. Divorce, remarriage, that sort of thing. My stomach dropped. Has she said anything specific? Nothing concerning. Just normal curiosity about why some families change. I think she's processing some things she's observed at home. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Julia's name on the screen. I'm so sorry. Her voice was rushed, slightly breathless. The Morrison situation exploded again, and we're stuck in damage control mode. I don't think I can make it tonight. The Morrison account that had closed weeks ago. I glanced around the room full of families, then at Hannah, who was watching me hopefully from across the room. Julia, she's been looking forward to this for weeks. I know. Can you take pictures? I'll make it up to her this weekend. This weekend, when she'd probably have another client emergency or investment opportunity with Eric. Sure, I'll handle it. You're the best. Love you. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone while Hannah approached with cautious optimism. Was that Mom? I knelt down to her level, choosing my words carefully. She got stuck at work, sweetheart, but she wanted me to take lots of pictures to show her. Hannah's face fell, but she recovered quickly with the resilience that children develop when disappointment becomes routine. That's okay. Will you help me explain my painting to the other parents? For the next hour, I watched my 8-year-old daughter charm a room full of adults with her insights about family dynamics. She talked about how the dog in her painting represented loyalty, how the house was the foundation that kept everyone safe, and how sometimes family members were in different places but still connected. Very wise, said a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find Maya approaching, elegant in a simple black dress that made every other woman in the room look overdressed. Maya, you came! Hannah launched herself at Maya with the kind of enthusiasm she usually reserved for ice cream and Christmas morning. I promised I would, didn't I? Maya hugged her back, then looked at me with those intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. I hope it's okay that I'm here. Hannah mentioned the show yesterday, and I love supporting young artists. Of course it's okay. More than okay. Having someone here who genuinely cared about Hannah's achievement felt like a gift. She's been the star of the evening. We stood together, watching Hannah explain her artistic process to Mrs. Rodriguez and a group of impressed parents. Maya smelled like vanilla and something floral, completely different from Julia's aggressive designer perfume or Tara's drugstore body spray. Where's Julia? Maya asked quietly. Client emergency. The kind that seems to happen every time there's a family event. Maya glanced at me sideways. The same kind of emergency that kept her from the soccer game last week? I looked at her sharply. How do you know about that? Hannah mentioned it yesterday. She's worried about her mom, you know. Kids always blame themselves when parents become distant. The casual way Maya understood my daughter's emotional state, when Julia barely seemed to notice Hannah existed, hit me harder than I expected. Here was someone who'd known Hannah for all of one conversation, and she already cared more about my child's well-being than her own mother did. "She's perceptive," I said, watching Hannah demonstrate her shading technique to a captivated audience. "She gets it from her father." The way Maya said it, like a compliment instead of an obligation, made something warm uncurl in my chest. When was the last time someone had given me credit for being a good parent? "About that coffee," I said impulsively. "Are you free now? I could use some adult conversation after this." Maya smiled, and I realized I'd been holding my breath waiting for her answer. "I'd love that. There's a place called Grind that stays open late. Very quiet, good for actual conversation." We said goodbye to Hannah, who was riding high on compliments and planning to call Aaron with a full report. I promised to pick up ice cream on the way home, which earned me a hug that made Julia's absence feel even more glaring. Grind was exactly as Maya had described: dim lighting, comfortable chairs, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged people to linger over their drinks. We found a corner table away from the handful of other customers, mostly college students with laptops and textbooks. "So," Maya said, wrapping her hands around a steaming mug of chai, "tell me about this client emergency that was more important than your daughter's art show." I laughed, surprised by her directness. "You don't waste time with small talk, do you? Life's too short. Besides, I've been watching you navigate this situation for months, and I think you could use someone to talk to." "Months?" "Tara's not exactly subtle about her arrangements, and you're not exactly good at hiding when something's bothering you." I studied her face, looking for judgment or pity, but found only genuine concern. "What gave me away?" "The way you smile when you're supposed to be happy, but your eyes look like you're solving a complex math problem. Also, the fact that you've never once mentioned your wife when you're at our apartment." "Our apartment." Interesting phrasing. "Julia's been distant lately, focused on work, on her career. I get it, but the girls notice." "And you? Do you notice?" The question was loaded with implications I wasn't ready to explore. Instead, I deflected. "What about you? How did you end up living with Tara?" Maya laughed, a sound like silver bells. "College roommates who never quite figured out how to live separately. She needed someone to split the rent. I needed a place close to work. It's temporary." "Everything seems to be temporary these days." She leaned forward, her dark eyes serious. "Not everything. Some things are worth investing in long term." The conversation shifted to safer topics: her job as a graphic designer, my work in IT, Hannah's obvious artistic talent, the challenges of living in a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. But underneath the casual chat, I could feel something building between us, a connection that had nothing to do with convenience or temporary arrangements. My phone buzzed. Text from Julia. "How did the show go? Sorry I missed it." I showed Maya the message, and she shook her head. "She's not sorry she missed it. She's sorry she has to pretend to care that she missed it." That's harsh. Is it wrong? I thought about Julia's phone conversation, her casual dismissal of our marriage, her mysterious client emergencies that always seemed to coincide with Eric's availability. "No, it's not wrong." "Tom," Maya said gently, "what are you going to do about this?" It was the question I'd been avoiding for months. What was I going to do about a wife who saw me as a placeholder and a girlfriend who rated me a 5 out of 10? What was I going to do about the slow dissolution of everything I'd thought was permanent in my life? "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm tired of being everyone's interim solution." Maya reached across the table and touched my hand, her fingers warm against my skin. "You're not an interim anything. You're a good father, a loyal husband, and a decent man. If they can't see that, it's their loss." For a moment, Sitting in that quiet coffee shop with someone who actually saw value in me, I felt like maybe things could be different. Maybe I didn't have to accept being treated like a temporary convenience by the people who were supposed to love me. Then my phone rang. Tara's name on the screen. "Aren't you supposed to be at my place?" Her voice was sharp with irritation. "I've been waiting for an hour." I looked at Maya, who was politely pretending not to listen to my girlfriend's complaints. "I told you I had Hannah's art show tonight." That was tonight? God, I forgot. "Well, can you come over now? I'm bored," and Maya's being antisocial. I glanced at Maya, who rolled her eyes and mouthed, "I'm right here." "Actually, I'm having coffee with Maya right now." Silence on the other end, then, "You're what? Why? Because we're both adults who enjoy conversation? That's weird. Whatever. Come over when you're done with your little chat." She hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me staring at my phone in embarrassment. I started. "You should probably finish your coffee and tell me more about Hannah's painting," Maya interrupted firmly. "Tara can wait. The world won't end if she's bored for another hour." I looked at this woman who'd shown more interest in my daughter's artistic achievement than either my wife or my girlfriend, and made a decision that felt like the first honest choice I'd made in months. "You're right," I said, putting my phone away. "Tell me about the shading technique you taught her." Maya's smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask." We talked for another 2 hours. I didn't go to Tara's apartment that night. Instead, I drove home through empty streets, thinking about Maya's laugh and the way she'd listened to my stories about the girls like they actually mattered. When I walked through my front door, I found Erin waiting up in the living room, supposedly doing homework, but obviously worried. "How was the art show?" she asked, closing her textbook with obvious relief. "Amazing. Hannah was the star of the evening. She explained her painting to half the room." "Mom didn't make it?" The careful way she asked told me everything I needed to know about how often this conversation had happened lately. "Work emergency." Erin nodded with the weary acceptance of a 13-year-old who'd stopped believing in her mother's promises. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit like a physical blow. I sat down beside her on the couch, buying time while I figured out how to answer honestly without destroying her world. "Why would you ask that?" "She's never here anymore, and when she is here, you guys barely talk to each other. Plus, Jessica's parents got divorced last year, and she said it started the same way." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw Julia's sharp intelligence combined with a perceptiveness that was entirely her own. She'd been watching our marriage disintegrate from the front row, and I'd been too caught up in my own hurt to notice. "Things have been difficult between your mom and me," I said carefully. "But whatever happens, it's not about you and Hannah. You know that, right?" "I know, but it still sucks." "Yeah, it does." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both of us processing the weight of unspoken truths. Finally, Erin spoke again. "I like Maya. She's nice." "When did you meet Maya?" "At Emma's house yesterday. She was visiting Emma's older sister, and we got to talking about art. She seemed really interested in Hannah's painting, and she knew a lot about shading techniques." Another small world moment that felt less like coincidence and more like fate. "She came to the art show tonight." "Really? That's cool. Did she like Hannah's painting?" "She loved it. She spent an hour talking to Hannah about artistic technique." Erin smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. "Maybe she can come over sometime. You know, when Mom's at one of her client emergencies." The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable. My 13-year-old daughter had figured out what I'd been trying to ignore for months. Julia's client emergencies were bullshit. "Maybe she can," I said. "Now get to bed. It's a school night." After Erin headed upstairs, I poured myself a scotch and sat in my home office, staring at the financial documents I'd been analyzing. Julia's spending patterns told a clear story. Expensive dinners, hotel charges, shopping sprees that coincided with her mysterious meetings. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was financing her exit strategy with our joint accounts. My phone buzzed. Text from Tara. Seriously? You just disappeared tonight. That's not okay. I stared at the message, thinking about her casual dismissal of me as a 5 out of 10 interim solution, her complete lack of interest in anything that mattered to me, her assumption that I should be available whenever she was bored. I typed back, "You're right, it's not okay. That's why I'm done." Her response came immediately. Done with what? This. Us. Whatever this was. My phone rang instantly. Tara's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You're breaking up with me? Over text?" "I'm ending something that was never really a relationship to begin with. You made it clear I was just a placeholder until you found someone better." "I never said that." 5 out of 10, Tara. Interim solution. Ring any bells? Silence on the other end, then. "That was just girl talk. I didn't mean anything by it." "Yes, you did? And that's fine. But I'm not interested in being anyone's backup plan anymore." "This is about Maya, isn't it? I saw how you two were looking at each other." "Actually, it was about self-respect and tired of accepting crumbs from people who should have been offering me full meals. But I didn't see any point in explaining that to someone who'd never understood my value in the first place. This is about me realizing I deserve better than someone who rates me like a Yelp review." I hung up and turned off my phone, feeling lighter than I had in months. One down, one to go. The next morning, I woke up to find Julia in the kitchen, fully dressed for work at 6 a.m., which was unusual. She typically rolled out of bed at the last possible minute, grabbing coffee and a protein bar on her way out the door. "Morning," I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot she'd already made. "You're up early." "Big day ahead. The Morrison situation is getting complicated." I sipped my coffee and watched her fidget with her phone, clearly waiting for something. "I thought the Morrison account closed weeks ago." She froze, coffee mug halfway to her lips. "What?" "The Morrison account. You told me it closed 2 weeks ago. Successful resolution. Big celebration at the office. Ring any bells?" Julia's face cycled through expressions: confusion, realization, panic, then settling on defensive irritation. "There are ongoing issues, post-closure complications." "What kind of complications?" "Legal stuff. You wouldn't understand." The casual dismissal stung, but I kept my voice level. "Try me. I might be more perceptive than you think." She studied my face, clearly trying to figure out how much I knew. "It's complicated, Tom. Client confidentiality and all that." "Right. Client confidentiality." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our joint credit card statements. "Is that why you had dinner at Chez Laurent last Tuesday? For client confidentiality?" Julia went very still. "How do you know about that?" "Joint account, remember? I get the statements too." I kept scrolling. "Interesting pattern here. Expensive dinners every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks. Always for 2 people. Always at restaurants we've never been to together." "Those are client meetings." "At romantic restaurants? With wine pairings? Come on, Julia. Give me some credit." She set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. "I don't know what you're implying, but I don't appreciate the interrogation." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been having dinner with someone every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks. You've been lying about the Morrison account. And yesterday, you missed Hannah's art show for a client emergency that doesn't exist. I had a legitimate work crisis. With Eric?" The name hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. Julia's face went pale, then flushed red. "What did you say?" "Eric, your brother-in-law's business partner. The guy you've been texting at all hours. The one who's been helping you explore your options." Julia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Finally, she managed. "I don't know what you think you heard. I heard you call me your interim solution. I heard you laugh about it. I heard you planning your exit strategy while I was fixing your sink." The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the girls getting ready for school upstairs. Julia stared at me like I'd grown a second head, clearly trying to figure out how her careful plans had been exposed. "Tom," she said finally, her voice taking on the reasonable tone she used with difficult clients. "I think you misunderstood." "I understood perfectly. You're having an affair with Eric. You're planning to divorce me after your partnership vote. And you've been financing your new relationship with our joint accounts while building a case for why you deserve everything in the settlement." Julia's lawyer training kicked in, and I could see her shifting into damage control mode. "Even if that were true, which it's not, what exactly do you plan to do about it?" It was a fair question. What was I going to do? Scream? Throw things? Beg her to stay? None of those options held any appeal. "I'm going to protect my daughters," I said quietly, "and I'm going to stop being anyone's interim solution." "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, Erin appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder, clearly having heard more of our conversation than I would have liked. "Morning, Mom. Dad." Her voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes were watchful. Julia immediately shifted into perfect mother mode, all traces of our confrontation disappearing behind a bright smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Ready for school?" "Yeah. Dad, can you drive me? I want to tell you about my history project." "Of course." I grabbed my keys, grateful for the excuse to end this conversation before it escalated further. "Let me get Hannah." As we headed for the door, Julia called after me. "Tom, we should finish this conversation later." "Looking forward to it," I said, though we both knew that was a lie. In the car, Erin was quiet until we were halfway to school. Then, "Are you okay, Dad?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just some grown-up stuff to work through." "Is it about Mom and that Eric guy?" I nearly drove off the road. "What do you know about Eric?" "He calls the house sometimes when you're not there. Mom always takes the calls in her room and closes the door. And last week I saw his car in the driveway when I came home from school, but Mom said he wasn't there." My 13-year-old daughter had been conducting her own investigation into her mother's affair. The thought made me sick. "Erin, I need you to know that whatever's happening between your mom and me, it's not your job to figure it out or fix it. Okay?" "I know. But I'm not stupid, Dad. And neither is Hannah, even though she's younger." We pulled into the school parking lot, joining the line of parents dropping off their kids for another day of learning and growing and pretending that their home lives were stable. "I love you, kiddo," I said, as Erin gathered her things. "I love you too, Dad. And for what it's worth, I think you're way better than a 5 out of 10. She was out of the car before I could ask her how she knew about that rating, leaving me sitting in the school parking lot, wondering how my family had become so good at keeping secrets from each other. My phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Thank you for coffee last night. I hope Hannah's riding high on her art show success." I typed back, "She is, and thank you for caring about her work. It meant a lot. Want to grab lunch today? I know a place that serves actual food instead of client emergencies." Despite everything that was falling apart in my life, I found myself smiling. "I'd love that." For the first time in months, I had something to look forward to that wasn't complicated by lies, ratings, or interim solutions. Lunch with Maya turned into 3 hours at a small bistro, where we talked about everything except the obvious elephant in the room. She told me about her work designing marketing materials for local businesses, her plans to freelance full-time, her family in Oregon, who called every Sunday without fail. I found myself describing the girls' personalities, my frustrations with corporate IT culture, my secret dream of starting my own consulting business. "What's stopping you?" she asked, stealing a French fry from my plate with the casual intimacy of someone who'd known me for years instead of months. "Fear," mostly. Stability. The girls need consistency, especially now. Especially now that their mother is planning to blow up their world anyway? I looked at her sharply. I never said that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you mention Julia. Maya leaned forward, her dark eyes serious. Tom, you can't protect them from something that's already happening. They know their mother is distant. They know something's wrong. Pretending everything's fine isn't helping anyone. She was right, of course. Erin's questions about divorce, Hannah's paintings that showed the family fractured, their casual acceptance of Julia's constant absences. My daughters were already living in the aftermath of our marriage. I was the only one still pretending we had something worth saving. What would you do? I asked. I'd stop letting other people write my story, she said simply. You're a good man, Tom. You deserve someone who sees that. The way she looked at me when she said it made my chest tight. Here was someone who valued my opinions, laughed at my jokes, and cared about my children's well-being. Someone who saw me as a complete person, instead of a temporary convenience. My phone buzzed, Julia's name on the screen. I should take this, I said apologetically. Tom, we need to talk. Tonight. After the girls are asleep. Her voice was crisp, controlled, the tone she used when she'd made a decision and was prepared to defend it. Okay, I'll be home by 8. Good. And Tom? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. She hung up before I could ask what this was, though I had a pretty good idea. The final conversation? Maya asked gently. Sounds like it? She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, remember that you have value. Don't let her convince you otherwise. I drove home through suburban streets that looked different somehow, like I was seeing them for the first time. The Hendersons' BMW was gone from their driveway, probably at the dealer for repairs after their son had borrowed it for his latest adventure in poor decision-making. The Johnsons' lawn was brown and patchy, a visible sign of their financial struggles. The Millers' boat sat under a tarp, unused since the second mortgage had made recreational activities a luxury they couldn't afford. Everyone on Maple Street was fighting their own battles, maintaining their own facades, protecting their own secrets. I'd been so focused on preserving the illusion of my perfect marriage that I'd forgotten to ask whether the marriage was actually worth preserving. The girls were at the kitchen table when I walked in, Hannah working on math homework, while Erin helped her with multiplication tables. The domestic scene was so normal, so peaceful, that I almost convinced myself that everything was fine. Dad! Hannah launched herself at me with her usual enthusiasm. Guess what? Mrs. Rodriguez wants to put my painting in the school art gallery. That's incredible, sweetheart. You're going to be famous. Will you help me write the artist's statement? Mrs. Rodriguez says I need to explain what inspired my painting. I glanced at Erin, who was watching this exchange with knowing eyes. Of course, we can work on it this weekend. Where's Mom? Erin asked casually, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Client meeting. She'll be home later. Hannah accepted this without question, but Erin's expression was skeptical. My 13-year-old had stopped believing her mother's excuses weeks ago. We had dinner together, take-out pizza because I hadn't planned ahead, and I helped Hannah with her artist statement while Erin did her own homework nearby. For a few hours, we were just a family having a normal evening, and I could almost forget about the conversation waiting for me upstairs. Julia arrived home at exactly 8 o'clock, her timing so precise that I knew she'd been sitting in her car, waiting for the appointed hour. She came upstairs to our bedroom, where I was folding laundry and trying to look like I wasn't dreading the next 30 minutes. Close the door, she said. I did, then sat on the edge of our bed while she paced in front of the window. She'd changed clothes since this morning, trading her work suit for jeans and a sweater that I didn't recognize. Everything about her body language suggested that she'd rehearsed this conversation. I want a divorce, she said, without preamble. The words hung in the air between us. Even though I'd been expecting them, hearing them spoken aloud felt like a physical blow. "Okay," I said quietly. She stopped pacing and stared at me. "Okay? That's it? What did you want me to say? That I'm shocked? That I'll fight for our marriage? We both know this has been over for months." Julia's face cycled through emotions: surprise, relief, then something that might have been disappointment. "I thought you'd be more upset." "I am upset, but I'm not surprised." She sat down in the chair across from our bed, suddenly looking older than her 39 years. "I've been thinking about this for a long time, Tom. We've grown apart. We want different things. You want Eric. This isn't about Eric." "Bullshit." The word came out harder than I'd intended, and Julia flinched. "This is entirely about Eric. You've been having an affair for months, financing it with our joint accounts, and lying to our daughters about where you spend your time. I never meant for it to happen. But it did happen. And instead of talking to me about problems in our marriage, you decided to audition my replacement while I paid for the privilege." Julia's lawyer training kicked in, and I could see her shifting into negotiation mode. "I know you're hurt, but we can handle this like adults, for the girl's sake." "What are you proposing?" "Joint custody. I keep the house, you take the condo downtown. We split the investments 50-50, and I'll cover the girl's expenses since my income is higher." I stared at her, amazed by the audacity of someone who'd been cheating on me for months, trying to dictate the terms of our divorce. "You've thought this through." "I've been practical about it. This doesn't have to be ugly, Tom." "You're right, it doesn't." I stood up and walked to our dresser, pulling out a manila folder I'd been preparing for weeks. "I've been practical too." Julia's face went pale as I handed her the folder. Inside were printed copies of her text messages with Eric, credit card statements highlighting their dinner dates, hotel receipts, and a detailed timeline of her lies about the Morrison account. "What is this?" she whispered. "Documentation, the kind that shows a pattern of adultery, financial deception, and parental neglect. The kind that family court judges find very interesting during custody hearings." "You've been spying on me?" "I've been paying attention. There's a difference." Julia flipped through the pages, her face growing paler with each revelation. This is evidence, and it's just the beginning." I sat back down on the bed, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in months. "See, Julia, you made a mistake. You assumed I was too ordinary, too passive, too grateful for your attention to fight back. You treated me like I was disposable." "Tom, I never meant—" "You called me your interim solution. You laughed about it. You planned to take everything I've worked for while you auditioned my replacement with money from our joint accounts." Tears were streaming down Julia's face now, but I felt no satisfaction in her distress. This wasn't about hurting her. It was about protecting myself and the girls. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to be honest with our daughters about why you're leaving. I want primary custody with you having visitation rights. I want the house, since I'm the parent who'll actually be here for them, and I want you to pay child support, since your income is higher. That's everything." "No, that's fair. Everything would be exposing your affair to your law firm, your family, and everyone in our social circle. Everything would be making sure Eric's wife knows exactly what kind of man she married." Julia's eyes widened. "You wouldn't. I don't want to. But if you try to screw me over in this divorce, if you try to paint me as the bad guy, if you do anything that hurts our daughters more than you already have, then yes, I absolutely would." We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us processing the new reality of our relationship. Julia wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself, but the confident woman who'd walked into this room was gone. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. But understand that this conversation changes everything. I'm not your interim solution anymore, Julia. I'm not anyone's interim solution." After she left the room, I sat alone in our bedroom, surrounded by 15 years of shared history that had been reduced to a property settlement and a custody arrangement. I felt empty, but not devastated, relieved, but not happy. My phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Thinking of you tonight. Hope everything went okay." I typed back, "It went exactly as expected. Thank you for caring. Want to talk about it? I make excellent late-night coffee." I looked around the bedroom that would soon be mine alone, then at the door where my daughters were probably listening for signs of the explosion they'd been expecting for months. "Rain check? I should be here for the girls tonight." "Of course. But Tom? You did the right thing." I hoped she was right. Because tomorrow I'd have to explain to Hannah and Aaron why their mother was moving out, why our family was changing, and why sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most end up hurting us the deepest. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own story. The next morning, Julia was gone before I woke up, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Rebecca's while I figure things out. We need to tell the girls soon. J." Coward. She'd blown up our family and then left me to handle the fallout while she processed her feelings in the comfort of her sister's guest room. Aaron appeared in the kitchen as I was making coffee, already dressed for school, but moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd heard more than she was supposed to. "Mom's car isn't in the driveway," she observed. "She stayed at Aunt Rebecca's last night." "Because you guys had a fight?" I looked at my 13-year-old daughter, who was trying so hard to pretend she wasn't terrified that her world was falling apart. "Because we had a conversation that we should have had months ago." "About getting divorced?" The question was asked with such matter-of-fact resignation that my heart broke a little. "Yes." Aaron nodded like I'd confirmed something she'd already known. "Is it because of Eric?" "It's because your mom and I want different things, and we can't figure out how to want the same things anymore." It was a careful answer, designed to be honest without destroying her relationship with her mother. Aaron deserved better than having to choose sides in a war she didn't start. "What about me and Hannah?" "You and Hannah are the most important things in my world. That will never change no matter what happens between your mom and me." Hannah chose that moment to bounce into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, completely oblivious to the tension that had been building for months. "Where's Mom? She promised to help me practice my spelling words." Aaron and I exchanged glances. "Mom had to leave early for work," I said, "but I can help you with spelling words." "You're not as good at it as Mom. Thanks for the vote of confidence, kiddo." I drove the girls to school, listening to Hannah chatter about her upcoming spelling test, while Aaron stared out the window with the weight of unspoken knowledge. At the drop-off, Hannah bounced out of the car with her usual enthusiasm, but Aaron lingered. "Dad, whatever happens, I want to stay with you." The simple statement hit me harder than Julia's demand for divorce. "Why?" "Because you're the one who shows up. You're the one who cares about our stuff, and you make better pancakes." She was out of the car before I could respond, leaving me sitting in the school parking lot with tears in my eyes and a fierce determination to make sure my daughters never doubted their worth the way I'd doubted mine. My phone rang, Maya's name on the screen. "How are you holding up?" she asked without preamble. "Better than expected. Julia wants a divorce." "And how do you feel about that?" "Relieved, mostly. Is that terrible?" "It's honest. Are you free for lunch? I have news that might cheer you up." "Good news or bad news?" "Complicated news, but I think you'll like it." We met at the same bistro as yesterday, but this time Maya was practically vibrating with excitement. She waited until we'd ordered before pulling out her phone and showing me a series of screenshots. "Remember how you broke up with Tara last night?" "Hard to forget." "Well, she's been having a very public meltdown on social media ever since, and it's spectacular." The screenshots showed a progression of increasingly unhinged posts from Tara's Instagram account. It started with cryptic quotes about betrayal and loyalty, escalated to a rant about fake friends who steal other people's boyfriends, and culminated in a live video where she'd apparently been drinking wine and sharing very specific details about her rating system for men. She rated all her ex-boyfriends? I asked, scrolling through the comments. All of them, with names, and very detailed explanations of their shortcomings. Maya was trying not to laugh. The internet is having a field day with it. I read some of the comments. A mixture of outrage from people who recognized the names, support from women who'd apparently had similar experiences with some of the men, and general mockery of Tara's complete lack of self-awareness. This is insane. It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Maya showed me another screenshot. She posted your breakup text conversation. What? The whole thing. Your message about being done, her response, your comment about being rated 5 out of 10. It's gone viral in our social circle. I stared at the screenshot, watching my private conversation being dissected by strangers on the internet. I should be mortified. Are you? I thought about it. Was I embarrassed that everyone now knew I'd been rated as mediocre by someone I'd been sleeping with? Was I upset that my personal business was being broadcast to anyone with an Instagram account? No, I said, surprising myself. I'm actually kind of proud of it. Why? Because I finally stood up for myself. Because I stopped accepting being treated like garbage. Because for once in my life, I chose my own value instead of letting someone else determine it for me. Maya's smile was radiant. Good, because there's more. She showed me another series of screenshots, messages from mutual friends and acquaintances, all expressing support for my decision and sharing their own stories about Tara's behavior. Apparently, you're not the first person she's treated this way, Maya explained. The consensus seems to be that you dodged a bullet, and she's finally facing consequences for being consistently awful to people. I scrolled through messages from people I barely knew, all offering variations of good for you and she had it coming. Even some of Tara's own friends had commented with criticism of her public breakdown. She's destroyed her own reputation, I said, amazed. Completely. And the best part? She did it all herself. You just refused to be her victim anymore. We spent the rest of lunch talking about the girls, my impending divorce, and Maya's plans to start freelancing. She'd already lined up 3 clients and was looking for office space, possibly in the same building where I'd been thinking about starting my consulting business. We could be office neighbors, she said casually, but there was something in her tone that suggested the idea appealed to her as much as it did to me. That would be convenient for coffee breaks. Very convenient. I drove back to work, feeling lighter than I had in months, but the feeling didn't last long. My phone rang as I was pulling into the office parking lot. Julia's name on the screen. We need to talk, she said without greeting. Tonight, the girls need to know what's happening. Agreed. What time? 6. I'll pick up dinner. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me with the knowledge that tonight would be the conversation that officially ended our family as the girls had known it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine IT tasks and distracted thoughts about how to explain divorce to an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old who'd already figured out more than they should have. I left work early to pick up the girls from school, finding them both unusually quiet on the drive home. Erin kept glancing at me like she wanted to ask questions, but wasn't sure she was ready for the answers. Hannah seemed to sense the tension without understanding its source. Is everything okay, Dad? She asked as we pulled into our driveway. Everything's gonna be okay, I said, which wasn't exactly the same thing but was the best I could offer. Julia arrived at exactly 6 o'clock with Chinese takeout from the girls' favorite restaurant. She'd clearly been crying, but she'd composed herself into a reasonable facsimile of the mother they remembered. We ate dinner with forced normalcy, discussing Hannah's spelling test and Erin's history project while carefully avoiding any mention of the conversation that was coming. Finally, Julia cleared her throat. "Girls, your dad and I need to talk to you about something important." Hannah's face immediately crumpled with worry. "Are you getting divorced?" The directness of the question caught Julia off guard, but I jumped in before she could deflect. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." "Is it because of me?" Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "No." Julia and I said it simultaneously, with such force that Hannah actually smiled a little. "It's because of grown-up problems that have nothing to do with you," I continued. "Sometimes people who love each other can't figure out how to live together anymore." "But you still love us?" Hannah asked. "More than anything in the world," Julia said, reaching for Hannah's hand. "That will never, ever change." Erin had been silent throughout this exchange, but now she spoke up. "What happens to us?" It was the practical question, the one that would determine their daily reality. Julia and I looked at each other, and I saw her realize that this was the moment where our private negotiations became public consequences. "You'll live with me," I said. "This is your home, and I'll be here. Your mom will have her own place, and you'll spend time with her too." "How much time?" Erin pressed. Julia cleared her throat. "We're still working out the details, but I want to see you as much as possible." It was a careful non-answer that Erin recognized immediately. "But not every day." "No," Julia admitted. "Not every day." Hannah started crying then, the quiet tears of a child who understands that her world is changing in ways she can't control. I pulled her onto my lap while Erin sat rigid in her chair, processing the information with the analytical mind she'd inherited from her mother. "When?" Erin asked. "Soon," Julia said. "I'm staying at Aunt Rebecca's for now while we figure out all the details." "You're already gone," Erin observed. "I'm still your mother. I'll always be your mother. But you won't be here." The conversation continued for another hour, with Julia and me trying to answer their questions honestly while minimizing the damage to their sense of security. Hannah eventually stopped crying and started asking practical questions about holidays and birthdays. Erin remained skeptical, but seemed to accept the inevitability of the situation. After Julia left, with promises to call tomorrow and plans to take the girls shopping over the weekend, I tucked Hannah into bed and listened to her worries about whether the divorce was somehow her fault. "Dad," she said as I was turning off her light, "are you sad?" "I'm sad that our family is changing," I said honestly, "but I'm not sad that you and Erin will still be with me every day." "Me too." Erin was waiting for me in the hallway when I came out of Hannah's room. "She's going to be okay," she said. "Hannah's tougher than she looks." "What about you? Are you going to be okay?" Erin considered the question seriously. "I think so. I mean, it's not like Mom was really here anyway. At least now we don't have to pretend everything's normal." The wisdom in her statement broke my heart and made me proud at the same time. My daughters were going to survive this, possibly even thrive, because they'd learned to value honesty over illusion. My phone buzzed as I was getting ready for bed. Text from Maya. "Thinking of you tonight. How did it go?" "Hard, but necessary. The girls are incredible. They get it from their father. Want company? I make excellent late-night tea and I'm a good listener." I looked around the house that was now officially mine, at the family photos that would need to be updated, at the life I was rebuilding from the ground up. "I'd love company," I typed back. 30 minutes later, Maya arrived with a thermos of chamomile tea and a container of homemade cookies. We sat on my couch, talking quietly about the girls' reactions, Julia's obvious guilt, and the strange relief that comes from finally telling the truth about something you've been hiding for months. "You did good tonight," Maya said, curled up beside me with her tea. "It couldn't have been easy." "It was easier than I expected. The girls already knew something was wrong. At least now they know what it is. And how are you doing with all this? I thought about the question seriously. How was I doing? My marriage was over, my family was fractured, and I was facing single parenthood while navigating a divorce that could get ugly if Julia decided to fight my terms. But I was also free from the constant anxiety of wondering when my wife would come home, free from pretending that her lies were believable, free from accepting treatment that made me feel worthless. I'm doing better than I have in months, I said. Is that weird? It's honest, and honesty looks good on you. She leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like maybe the future held possibilities instead of just problems. Maya? I said quietly. Thank you for seeing value in me when I couldn't see it myself. She looked up at me with those dark eyes that had seen through my facades from the beginning. You never lost your value, Tom. You just forgot how to recognize it. And then she kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise for whatever came next. Outside, it started to rain, washing away the remnants of a day that had changed everything. Inside, I held someone who valued me for exactly who I was, surrounded by the echoes of daughters who loved me unconditionally, in a house that was finally, truly mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.